think the symposium is probably the first of its kind that I've been to regionally here in the Lower Mainland that's pulled together such a diverse group of actors and people involved in sort of risk and risk reduction, both community members, students, academics, scientists, practitioners at various levels of government, and actually engage them in a dialogue.
It's really good to have those conversations about how we can work together across jurisdictions, because individual communities and organizations are doing great work, but we really need some kind of regional initiative to really pull those resources together and do some more coordinated efforts.
At the UR Symposium, we had an enormous diversity of people here, which I think was fabulous in terms of cross-pollination. We had engineers, architects, biologists, lawyers, elected officials, health professionals, emergency management professionals, fire chiefs, disaster responders. It was a very, very diverse group of people.
It also is important to bring perspectives across different cultures. And so how I think about risk might be very different than how you think about risk from a cultural perspective. And we heard some fabulous stories, thinking about risk in the context of how we're connected to the land. So the Understanding Risk Vancouver Symposium is all about exploring what it means to live with risk here in the Georgia Basin region from as many different perspectives as possible, and to use those insights to help us identify opportunities for reducing our risk and building our resilience moving forward.
It's important that our ownership of the land is acknowledged, but there's a far more important issue at hand, and that is our cultural contribution to the larger world. For more than 9,000 years, we valued balance with nature. That was the source of our law. And we are looking at a situation where global warming is threatening the world. I would like to share a couple of our teachings with you, and hopefully those will be a meaningful gift.
We just obviously live with all these hazards. We have 35 creeks that intersect our municipality. We're sandwiched between the Pacific Ocean and the Coast Mountain Range. We get a ton of rain in the wintertime. We're the urban area with the backdrop of the forested watersheds that provide all the drinking water for Metro Vancouver. Geographically, our hazards are quite obvious, and then we've also had a number of events. The most prolific event, I think, was the 2005 Berkeley landslide, where a woman lost her life sleeping in her home in the middle of the night when a landslide came down and completely wiped out her house.
I think it's also nice to see the insurance people here, because actually they're probably some of the folks that has the most advanced tools and resources for this kind of work, but a lot of the time is proprietary. So it's good to include them in the conversation to really see what can be done together.
I really like data and the visualization of it, the communication and the integration of various services. What I'm quite excited about is to hear all these different parts that people have been working on, and I'm already trying to think of how could I integrate those kind of services, that the great things that have worked, and how can we bridge all these different silos and break them open and pull all that data together and make it more meaningful that way.
Risk in an environment like we have here in the Georgia Basin is different depending on where you are. So it changes with place, and it changes over time. And so we tend to, up to this point, we've been thinking about risk as a static thing that we can measure and understand. But in fact, it's not that at all. It's a very dynamic and fluid result of choices that we have made over the last 150 years of our being here.
Well, I think people are more aware. My personal experience is that we fear more what we don't know than what we know. And so once people are aware of their risks, then you can actually start talking about them and talking about what they can do to reduce their risk, and then people feel empowered to take action. Otherwise, they feel kind of overwhelmed that they don't know much about it and they don't know what to do about it.
Big problems are things tend not to be interactive, like sitting and hearing about someone telling you something is risky is, not as engaging as other forms of communication, I think. And secondly, if it's presented in an overly complicated and scientific and even numerical way, then people, I don't know, a lot of people, your general public for sure, will tune out. It doesn't become a priority for them.
It's solutions like videos and video games perhaps, and magazines and things where you can really get out a message that's more indirect than sort of saying, hey, listen to me about public safety. Nobody wants to hear that message, but if you talk to them about family, if you talk to them about their community, if you talk to them about how those things are connected to a greater resilience, a greater sort of risk profile, then it's not so hard to digest. If you talk to them about their families and their pets and their issues, it's a lot easier conversation to have.
And so we need to do a better job with our risk communication, with our risk modeling, and refocus it on what the opportunity is. And I think when we do that, then the conversation starts to get very interesting and lively, and we saw that today in our symposium.
We can develop buildings that will stay standing and be usable after an earthquake. If the building doesn't fall down and the building can still be used, a large component of the risk is gone. I think one of the biggest opportunities we're focusing on at the moment, and we're at the early stages of that, is engaging the community and empowering them to take action themselves. So as government, we have a role to play, but the power that exists in the community and the expertise and the ability to drive forward and come up with innovative solutions and put them into practice is huge, and that's an untapped resource that we currently have.
One of those areas I think of main concern is our building code. We've done a lot of planning both at the federal level, provincial level, and indeed municipal level, of looking at responses to earthquakes and figuring out how to look after people when they're displaced from damaged buildings. So I think we've got to change the whole construct about how we look at buildings and make our buildings resilient to our natural hazard environment.
We're in a period of rapid redevelopment in this region. Most of our homes were built in the 50s and 60s, and they're all now sort of reaching the end of their useful life and they're being redeveloped. I think we can do much better in building more resilient buildings, but it takes all levels of government really to coordinate that, from the National Building Code to the provincial codes to the local level, which are enforcing those codes. We all need to work together to have stronger building policies.
It all comes down to money and incentives and time, and it's disruptive to upgrade buildings. It's disruptive to upgrade infrastructure. There's more clever tools and devices coming out all the time, and we can now upgrade very vulnerable historic buildings to be as robust or better than new buildings. As an example, the technology of base isolation, which we just upgraded a 120-year-old heritage building, which now will be, in theory, functional after a large earthquake.
The disaster support hubs that we're working on are really about providing a location for the community at the grassroots level to come together and support each other after a catastrophic event. But they're just as important about facilitating that dialogue and that engagement before an emergency.
I think that oftentimes, we all get caught up in it. We sit at our desk and we think of these different ideas in our own silos. Unless we're having these conversations in community, how can we come up with community solutions? So I think that this forum has been a great opportunity for those types of conversations.
It's so important to bring different perspectives about risk and resilience together into a conversation, because risk affects us all so differently.
We are looking at, we can do like a risk modeling on a very small area. Let's take the district of North Vancouver. So we can go in, we can try to understand what's the risk profile, what's the exposure, and we can try to communicate and narrate this and bring this out to the people. That's great, but can we take that whole process and scale that up in a way that we can have that available province-wide, Canada-wide for all municipalities? That's just a great way, if we can do that, to really save resources for all the local municipalities.
The other aspect in terms of understanding risk is, again, our lending portfolio and understanding where we lend our money out to. There are lots of mortgages that are in floodplains, but then again, they're just also located in the Lower Mainland, so they're also vulnerable to the catastrophic earthquake as well.
When I really think about all the risks that I'm dealing with by living in the Lower Mainland, it's really hard to figure out what to do, and I get overwhelmed with all the different actions that I could take, but what really is missing is that kind of incentive or the policy or the guidance from policymakers or government to really show us what we can do to be personally prepared.
I think a resilient Georgia Nation for me would be a place where you're hearing people talk about hazards and risks, and not being so fearful and not being so overwhelmed with those risks, but talking about them in productive ways, and not in a boring kind of way, but as a let's think about solutions, let's look at creativity, and let's really look at what we can do together to be part of a solution.
A resilient Georgia Basin to me is where everyone understands the hazards and risks, where our existing vulnerable infrastructure has been upgraded or retrofit or removed altogether, where new buildings are built in a manner that reduces future losses, and where any residual risks or unanticipated risks are managed through insurance or through emergency planning. But overall, overarching all of that, it's about social resilience for me. So it's people knowing their neighbors and knowing who has what strengths and who has what vulnerabilities, and working together socially, because we can't prepare for absolutely everything here.
I was describing to someone that I found that this particular conference or forum felt a lot more like a dialogue. It felt like there was more conversation between individuals and even groups and sectors, and that there was a genuine desire to create new ideas and move forward as a collective.
As a friend and colleague of mine once said, remember, when you bring together people from different perspectives for a conversation around topics like risk and resilience and sustainability, bear in mind that we're really talking about jazz, not a classical script. And so we need to be prepared to be surprised. And the reason that we bring people together in this kind of a format is for those surprises, those inspirations, those innovations that come out of sharing ideas and perspectives in a way that we don't get to do every day.